October 14th, 2022, 9:47 p.m. A final, chilling text message sent from a dark parking garage in Dallas, Texas. By sunrise, Sarah Jenkins, a promising art student, was gone. Her family reported her missing that morning, clinging to hope. But within 48 hours, investigators found her car abandoned, signs of a violent struggle. This is the story of how grainy CCTV footage, once dismissed as useless, became the key to unlocking a brutal truth that shattered a community. What really happened in those final terrifying moments? The air in Sarah Jenkins' art studio hung heavy and still, thick with the scent of turpentine and drying oil paints. Sunlight filtered through a grimy window overlooking a nondescript Dallas street, illuminated motes of dust dancing in the silence. It had been 3 days since anyone had seen Sarah. 3 days since her phone calls went unanswered, her social media fell silent, and her car was found abandoned on a desolate stretch of highway an hour outside the city. For her mother, Brenda Jenkins, this studio, once a sanctuary of vibrant creativity, had become a monument to absence. Brenda stood near the center of the room, her early 50s frame appearing smaller, diminished by a grief that seemed to have leached the color from her world. Her soft brown hair, streaked with premature gray, was pulled back loosely, accentuating the deep lines etched around her once bright eyes, now perpetually red-rimmed and clouded with unshed tears. She wore a simple, faded floral print dress, the kind of comfortable, unpretentious attire that spoke of a life dedicated to others, a life now irrevocably fractured. Her hands, perpetually clasped tightly before her, were pale and thin, the knuckles almost white, betraying the immense pressure she was under. Detective Michael Hayes, a man etched by the grim realities of his profession, moved with a deliberate, almost methodical pace through the studio. In his late 40s, his 6'0" solid athletic build was clad in a practical dark suit that, while professional, seemed as worn and lived in as his face. The short, dark hair, neatly trimmed and starting to gray at the temples, did little to soften the analytical intensity in his piercing blue eyes. These eyes, accustomed to scanning crime scenes for the smallest, most telling detail, now swept over Sarah's canvases, her scattered brushes, the half-finished sculptures. He was searching for anything, a clue, an anomaly, a whisper of what had happened to the bright young artist. He knelt by a small, unfinished charcoal sketch on an easel, a portrait of a striking, unfamiliar woman, her features sharp and almost predatory. "The last thing she was working on?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Barely disturbed the quiet. Brenda nodded, her gaze fixed on the sketch. "She mentioned meeting someone, said they had an interesting face, someone she wanted to capture." Brenda's voice was raspy, a thin thread of sound in the suffocating silence. She wrung her hands. I thought she was just talking about her art, finding inspiration." Hayes stood up, his gaze returning to the general disarray that spoke of an abrupt departure. A palette lay on the floor, splatters of cobalt blue and cadmium yellow staining the worn wooden planks. A half-eaten apple sat on a table, a single bite taken, a silent testament to an interrupted moment. "She left in a hurry, it seems," Hayes observed, his tone neutral, professional, yet laced with an undercurrent of concern. He walked over to a corkboard plastered with photos, exhibition flyers, and vibrant sketches. There were pictures of Sarah, young and beaming, her long, wavy auburn hair cascading around her expressive hazel eyes, often holding a sketchbook or a paintbrush. She looked alive, full of promise, a stark contrast to the void she had left behind. He noted her typical attire in the photos: jeans, comfortable t-shirts, a paint-splattered denim jacket, the bohemian artist persona she embodied. Her social media, he recalled from his initial briefing, was a testament to her hopeful aspirations and her burgeoning talent. Did she mention any specific plans for the night she disappeared? A meeting, a gallery opening, anything out of the ordinary? Brenda shook her head, fresh tears welling. No, nothing specific. She said she was going to work late, that she had a breakthrough on a new piece. She always said that when she was inspired, that she had to capture it before it slipped away. She gestured vaguely towards a large draped canvas in the corner. I don't even know what she was working on. Hayes approached the draped canvas, his movements slow and deliberate. The weight of his investigation, the desperate hope of finding Sarah alive, pressed down on him with every step. He could feel the eyes of the grieving mother on his back, a silent plea for answers he wasn't yet able to provide. The studio, so full of Sarah's life and passion moments ago, now felt like a tomb, echoing with her absence. The lingering scent of paint was no longer that of creation, but of a life abruptly, tragically cut short. He knew that somewhere the person responsible for this emptiness was out there, hidden, perhaps watching, and he vowed, with the quiet intensity that defined him, to find them, to bring Sarah home, or at least to bring her justice. The silence in the room was a tangible thing, broken only by Brenda's soft, choked sobs and the distant hum of Dallas traffic, a world continuing on, oblivious to the profound loss within these four walls. The weight of the unknown was almost unbearable. Every brushstroke, every finished canvas, every smudged fingerprint on a forgotten tube of paint felt like a message from Sarah, a puzzle piece waiting to be found. He picked up a well-worn sketchbook from a cluttered desk, its cover stained with various hues. Flipping through it, he saw intricate drawings, vibrant landscapes, and studies of human emotion, all rendered with a skill and sensitivity that belied her youth. There were also pages filled with rough, hurried sketches, faces contorted in distress, shadows that seemed to writhe. Was this art imitating life, or life imitating art? He closed the book gently, placing it back where he found it. The artist was gone, but her spirit, her voice remained, trapped within the walls of this studio, waiting to be heard. The sterile fluorescent lights of the Dallas Police Department's Major Crimes Division hummed with a relentless, almost oppressive energy. It was late, the kind of late where the city outside seemed to hold its breath, and the only sounds were the rhythmic clatter of keyboards and the low murmur of exhausted detectives. Detective Michael Hayes, his face illuminated by the stark glow of his computer monitor, was deep in the digital trenches. For 3 days, since Sarah Jenkins' abandoned car was found, keys still in the ignition, a half-full travel mug of now cold coffee in the cup holder, her favorite worn denim jacket neatly folded on the passenger seat, the car, a modest blue sedan, offered no immediate signs of foul play, no fingerprints other than Sarah's, no stray hairs that didn't belong. The area where it was found, a lonely stretch of highway surrounded by scrub brush and silence, yielded nothing but the vast indifference of the Texas landscape. Every witness interviewed had seen nothing, heard nothing. Sarah Jenkins, a young artist with a bright future, had simply vanished into thin air. Hayes rubbed his tired eyes, the lines on his face deepening with fatigue. He'd been through Sarah's social media feeds, her emails, her phone records, looking for any hint of a threat, a secret meeting, a clandestine relationship. Her online presence painted a picture of a vibrant, hopeful young woman, her posts filled with images of her artwork, bold strokes of color, intricate details, a profound connection to the world she was trying to capture. There were photos of her smiling with friends, at university exhibitions, at quiet cafes, sketching in her ever-present notebook. Nothing suggested she was in danger. Nothing indicated she would willingly disappear. Yet the lack of any struggle, any obvious motive, made the case all the more chilling. It pointed to someone who knew her, someone she might have trusted, or someone incredibly adept at masking their tracks. He scrolled through the thousands of photos on her cloud storage, images of her vibrant creations, her hopeful aspirations, and then a series of candid shots taken in what looked like a public park. The subjects were varied: laughing children, elderly couples, solitary figures lost in thought. But in the corner of one frame, partially obscured by foliage, a man, medium height, average build, unremarkable dark clothing. His face was turned away, but something about his posture, his stillness, felt off. Hayes zoomed in, enhancing the image, but the resolution was too poor, the angle too obscure to offer any real identification. It was a ghost in the machine, a flicker of possibility in the overwhelming darkness. Suddenly, a ping. An encrypted email flagged by the department's cybersecurity unit as originating from an anonymous source. The subject line was stark: Sarah Jenkins. Hayes's pulse quickened. He opened the message. It contained a single grainy photograph and a short, chilling text. "She's not dead yet. Look at the park." The photograph was the same one Hayes had just been scrutinizing: the park. He cross-referenced the metadata from Sarah's cloud photos with the timestamp on the email. The park depicted was Lakeside Park, a sprawling public space on the outskirts of Dallas. The email had arrived just an hour ago. The sender was untraceable, routing through multiple proxies. A taunt? A genuine lead? Hayes couldn't afford to dismiss it. He stood up, grabbing his worn leather jacket. "Got something," he announced to the few colleagues still in the bullpen. "Lakeside Park. Anonymous tip. Says she's not dead yet." The words hung in the air, a fragile sliver of hope. He knew this could be a cruel game, a manipulation by the perpetrator to gauge the investigation's progress, to sow confusion. But the possibility, however slim, that Sarah was still alive was enough to propel him forward. He thought of Brenda Jenkins, the quiet strength etched on her face, the unimaginable pain of not knowing. He thought of Sarah, the vibrant artist whose life had been so brutally interrupted. This anonymous tip, this unseen shadow playing dames, was pushing him, and he was ready to play. He knew, with a certainty forged in years of investigation, that the next steps were critical. The perpetrator wanted them to look at the park, to follow this breadcrumb. It was a test, and Hayes intended to pass it, not just to find Sarah, but to understand the mind behind this calculated cruelty. He gathered his team, briefing them on the email and the photograph, emphasizing the need for absolute discretion and a meticulous search of Lakeside Park. Every corner, every hiding spot, every discarded item would be scrutinized. The park, once a place of leisure, was about to become the focus of a desperate manhunt. The stakes had never been higher. Miles away from the sterile lights of the police station, in a forgotten corner of the city where the industrial sprawl met overgrown wilderness, Markham Sterling moved through his domain. It wasn't a mansion or a fortified compound, but a dilapidated single-story house on the far east side of Dallas, a place most would overlook, a place where silence was a cloak and shadows were his only companions. The house itself was a testament to neglect: peeling paint, boarded-up windows on one side, a sagging porch roof. Inside, however, was where Sterling's twisted sense of order began to manifest. It was meticulously, disturbingly clean, yet devoid of any personal warmth or character. The air was stale, carrying the faint metallic tang of something unsettling beneath the veneer of domesticity. Sterling, mid-30s, average height and build, his medium-length unkempt brown hair often falling into his vacant, calculating gray eyes, surveyed his surroundings with a deep-seated need for control. He was dressed in his usual unremarkable dark clothing, a faded black hoodie, dark practical jeans, and worn sneakers that made no sound on the scuffed linoleum floor. Dark circles underscored his eyes, a permanent testament to a life lived on the fringes, fueled by a simmering resentment and a twisted sense of entitlement. He ran a hand over a perfectly polished but ancient wooden table in what served as his kitchen. On it sat a single, pristine white plate. Beside it, a small, intricately carved wooden bird, a stark contrast to the otherwise bare surfaces. This was his sanctuary, his stage. Here he curated his existence, a stark departure from the perceived injustices of his past, the constant feeling of being overlooked, of being denied what he believed was rightfully his. He had followed the news of Sarah Jenkins' disappearance with a detached, almost clinical interest, a morbid fascination with the chaos he had sown. The anonymous tip he'd sent was a deliberate escalation, a game of cat and mouse designed to assert his superiority, to taunt the investigators, to control the narrative. He relished the power this anonymity gave him, the ability to influence events from the shadows, to watch the authorities scramble while he remained unseen. He replayed the moment he'd left Sarah's car, the chilling calm with which he'd placed her jacket on the seat, a final twisted act of possession. He hadn't killed her, not yet. Her continued existence, her fear, her despair, that was his true masterpiece, his ultimate expression of control. He needed to maintain that tension, that fragile hope Brenda Jenkins clung to, because it was in that hope that his power truly lay. He considered the next move. The park tip was a success. It had drawn Hayes into his orbit, made him a participant in Sterling's macabre play. Now he needed to keep them guessing, to keep them off balance, to ensure his escape when the time came. He walked into another room, this one darker, more utilitarian. It was here, in this hidden space, that his obsession took tangible form. A large industrial cage sat against one wall, its metal bars glinting faintly in the dim light filtering from the main room. He peered inside, his gray eyes scanning the interior, a chilling satisfaction settling over him. Sarah Jenkins, the vibrant artist, the hopeful soul, was here. She was a prisoner, her spirit slowly being eroded by fear and isolation, her life now entirely dependent on his whim. He saw her huddled in a corner, her slender 5'6" frame trembling, her long wavy auburn hair matted and disheveled, obscuring her bright, expressive hazel eyes. Her bohemian clothes were torn and stained. She was a stark contrast to the joyful artist seen in photographs, a testament to the power he wielded. He knew the police were searching, that Detective Hayes was relentless, but they were looking for a ghost, following a trail he had meticulously laid. They were searching for a victim, but they didn't truly understand the artist behind the disappearance. He turned away from the cage, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He had orchestrated this perfectly. The investigation was a distraction. His true focus was the intricate web of psychological control he had woven. He knew Hayes was a man driven by duty, by justice. Sterling was driven by something far darker, a profound, all-consuming need to dominate, to prove his own significance by the destruction of another's life. He was the unseen shadow, the architect of Sarah's nightmare. And the true horror was that he had only just begun.
The longer he kept Sarah alive, the greater his sense of power, the more profound his victory. He would break her completely, not just her body, but her spirit, her art, her very will to exist. And then perhaps he would let her go, or end it. The choice, entirely his, was the ultimate thrill.
The Texas sun beat down on the dusty lot, baking the cracked asphalt and illuminating the grim tableau that had become the epicenter of a city's anxiety. It was October 17, 2023, a date now etched into the collective memory of Dallas. Detective Michael Hayes stood near Sarah Jenkins' car, a modest cherry-red sedan, now a symbol of profound loss. The vehicle had been discovered abandoned 3 days prior, on October 14th, in a secluded industrial park on the outskirts of the city, a place far from Sarah's usual artistic haunts. The car was locked, but inside, forensic technicians had meticulously documented every detail. Hayes, a man whose late 40s etched lines of relentless dedication onto his face, ran a gloved hand over the car's cool metallic surface. His piercing blue eyes, accustomed to sifting through the detritus of human tragedy, scanned the desolate surroundings. Empty warehouses loomed like skeletal sentinels against the pale sky, their windows dark and vacant. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of oil and decay hung in the air, a stark contrast to the vibrant studios and galleries Sarah Jenkins, the 22-year-old artist, would have called home. Sarah, her name echoed in the quiet hum of the crime scene tape. Hayes remembered Brenda Jenkins' tear-streaked face, the raw grief of a mother whose world had imploded. Brenda, in her early 50s, her soft brown hair now heavily streaked with gray, had clutched a worn photograph of her daughter, Sarah, a beaming smile frozen in time on the glossy paper. She spoke of Sarah's passion, her infectious optimism, her burgeoning talent that promised a bright future, a future now cruelly extinguished. Hayes was tasked with piecing together the fragments of that lost future. The vehicle itself yielded few immediate answers, no signs of forced entry, no obvious struggle. It was as if Sarah had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only her vehicle and a chilling void. The interior was clean, almost unnervingly so, save for a faint smudge of what appeared to be cadmium yellow acrylic paint on the driver's side door handle, a detail that resonated deeply with the investigators. Sarah, with her bohemian style and paint-splattered jacket, was rarely without traces of her craft. This tiny mark, however, felt less like an artistic accident and more like a whisper from the crime itself. Hayes instructed his team to process the car for every microscopic fiber, every latent print, every trace of DNA. The digital footprint was the next frontier. Sarah's phone, found in her apartment, was a treasure trove of her life. Social media posts filled with her vibrant creations, messages exchanged with friends and family, her digital sketchbook teeming with ideas and inspirations. Her last outgoing text was to her mother, Brenda, sent on the evening of October 13th, a simple, "Love you, Mom, heading out to clear my head." Her last social media activity was a shared post from a local art supply store, a photograph of new brushes with the caption, "Ready to create something magical." The timeline was critical. Sarah had reportedly gone for a drive to decompress, a habit she often indulged in when facing creative blocks or personal stress. Her route had been erratic, according to cell tower data, deviating from her usual paths, eventually leading her to this desolate industrial park. There were no witnesses, no security cameras in the immediate vicinity. The digital trail offered breadcrumbs, but the physical trail had gone cold, swallowed by the vast, indifferent landscape. Hayes stared at the faint yellow smudge on the door handle. It was a minuscule clue, a nearly invisible testament to Sarah's presence and perhaps to the last moments of her freedom. He knew this single speck of paint could be the key, a silent witness to an unseen struggle or a deliberate act.
The contrast between Sarah's vibrant life, documented in her art and online presence, and the bleakness of this abandoned lot was a chasm he had to bridge. He had to find out what happened between that last text message and the discovery of her car, to understand the forces that had silenced such a promising voice. The investigation was just beginning, and the silence of this place was deafening. He looked towards the horizon, where the sun was beginning its descent, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to mock the search for truth. The derelict warehouses, once humming with industrial life, now stood as monuments to obsolescence, a chilling parallel to the lost potential of Sarah Jenkins. The digital world offered clues, but the physical world, in its stark emptiness, held the brutal reality of her disappearance. Hayes felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle upon him. He had to do this for Brenda. He had to do this for Sarah. He had to find the truth, no matter how deeply it was buried in the digital dust or the desolate concrete. Detective Michael Hayes sat in the stark glow of his office, the digital ghost of Sarah Jenkins unfolding before him on a bank of monitors. It was late, the Dallas skyline a distant, blurred panorama through the rain-streaked window. The hum of servers and the rhythmic click of his keyboard were the only sounds in the room, a stark counterpoint to the vibrant life they were trying to resurrect from lines of code and metadata. The forensic team had delivered their preliminary findings on Sarah's digital devices. Her smartphone, recovered from her apartment, was a window into her world, a curated collection of art, aspirations, and fleeting romance. Her social media was a public gallery of her journey, stunning landscape paintings, evocative portraits, sketches capturing the spirit of Dallas street life. Her followers numbered in thousands, a testament to her growing recognition. Her last posts, just hours before her disappearance on October 13th, were filled with an artist's characteristic optimism. A photo of new, high-quality sable brushes with a caption about channeling inspiration, and a shared post from a local art gallery showcasing a piece by an artist she admired. The timeline was critical. Sarah had reportedly gone for a drive to decompress, a habit she often indulged in when facing creative blocks or personal stress. Her route had been erratic, according to cell tower data, deviating from her usual paths, eventually leading her to this desolate industrial park. There were no witnesses, no security cameras in the immediate vicinity. The digital trail offered breadcrumbs, but the physical trail had gone cold, swallowed by the vast, indifferent landscape. Hayes stared at the faint yellow smudge on the door handle. It was a minuscule clue, a nearly invisible testament to Sarah's presence and perhaps to the last moments of her freedom. He knew this single speck of paint could be the key, a silent witness to an unseen struggle or a deliberate act. The contrast between Sarah's vibrant life, documented in her art and online presence, and the bleakness of this abandoned lot was a chasm he had to bridge. He had to find out what happened between that last text message and the discovery of her car, to understand the forces that had silenced such a promising voice. The investigation was just beginning, and the silence of this place was deafening. He looked towards the horizon, where the sun was beginning its descent, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to mock the search for truth. The derelict warehouses, once humming with industrial life, now stood as monuments to obsolescence, a chilling parallel to the lost potential of Sarah Jenkins. The digital world offered clues, but the physical world, in its stark emptiness, held the brutal reality of her disappearance. Hayes felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle upon him. He had to do this for Brenda. He had to do this for Sarah. He had to find the truth, no matter how deeply it was buried in the digital dust or the desolate concrete. Detective Michael Hayes sat in the stark glow of his office, the digital ghost of Sarah Jenkins unfolding before him on a bank of monitors. It was late, the Dallas skyline a distant, blurred panorama through the rain-streaked window. The hum of servers and the rhythmic click of his keyboard were the only sounds in the room, a stark counterpoint to the vibrant life they were trying to resurrect from lines of code and metadata.
The forensic team had delivered their preliminary findings on Sarah's digital devices. Her smartphone, recovered from her apartment, was a window into her world, a curated collection of art, aspirations, and fleeting moments. Her social media was a public gallery of her journey. Stunning landscape paintings, evocative portraits, sketches capturing the spirit of Dallas street life. Her followers numbered in thousands, a testament to her growing recognition. Her last posts, just hours before her disappearance on October 13th, were filled with an artist's characteristic optimism. A photo of new, high-quality sable brushes with a caption about channeling inspiration, and a shared post from a local art gallery showcasing a piece by an artist she admired. The timeline was critical. Sarah had reportedly gone for a drive to decompress, a habit she often indulged in when facing creative blocks or personal stress. Her route had been erratic according to cell tower data, deviating from her usual paths, eventually leading her to this desolate industrial park. There were no witnesses, no security cameras in the immediate vicinity. The digital trail offered breadcrumbs, but the physical trail had gone cold, swallowed by the vast, indifferent landscape. Hayes stared at the faint yellow smudge on the door handle. It was a minuscule clue, a nearly invisible testament to Sarah's.
The rain had stopped, leaving Dallas washed clean, but the grim task of cleaning up the emotional wreckage left by Sarah Jenkins' disappearance continued. Detective Michael Hayes, his late 40s etched with a weariness that even a night's sleep couldn't erase, found himself increasingly drawn to the faint yellow smudge on Sarah's car door. It was a minuscule clue, easily overlooked, but it represented a tangible, physical link to her final moments. He had spent the past 2 days meticulously sifting through Sarah's life, her digital footprint, her physical belongings, searching for a pattern, a motive, anything that could connect the vibrant artist to the anonymous messages and the desolate parking lot. The Control Art 77 persona was a digital phantom, carefully constructed to mislead and evade. But Hayes was starting to see cracks in the facade. He requested a deep dive into local art supply store purchase records, focusing on any unusual or bulk purchases of specific pigments, particularly cadmium yellow. It was a long shot, a needle in a digital haystack, but he was desperate. Meanwhile, Brenda Jenkins, Sarah's mother, had been a constant, albeit heartbreaking presence. She provided Hayes with Sarah's journals, stacks of them filled with her innermost thoughts, dreams, and artistic critiques. Hayes read them not as a detective, but as a man trying to understand a young life brutally cut short. He saw Sarah's deep love for her craft, her frustrations with creative blocks, her encounters with people in the art community. In one entry dated just a few weeks before her disappearance, Sarah described a strange encounter at a small independent gallery opening. She'd felt watched, uncomfortable, by a man who lingered too long near her work, his gaze intense and unsettling. She described him as nondescript, easily lost in a crowd, but his presence had left her feeling uneasy. She didn't mention a name, only the feeling of being scrutinized, a feeling that echoed the possessive tone of the Control Art 77 messages. Hayes cross-referenced this description with security footage from the gallery, a grainy, low-resolution feed that offered little detail. However, a facial recognition algorithm fed with images of known individuals with minor offenses related to stalking or harassment flagged a potential match: Markham Mark Sterling. Sterling was a ghost in the system, a man who had slipped through the cracks of society for years. His record was sparse, minor shoplifting, loitering, nothing substantial. He moved from town to town, taking odd jobs, living a life of deliberate anonymity. He had no fixed address, no significant online presence beyond a few dormant social media profiles that offered no personal insights. He was the epitome of the unseen shadow. The connection felt tenuous, a whisper of a possibility.
Hayes ordered his team to flag Sterling for surveillance, but the challenge was immense. How do you find a man who actively avoids being found? The breakthrough, however, came from an unexpected source, the art supply store records. A bulk purchase of cadmium yellow acrylic paint made just days before Sarah's disappearance was flagged. The purchaser used a prepaid debit card, untraceable by itself, but the transaction had occurred at a store located conveniently close to the industrial park where Sarah's car was found. Digging further, the tech team managed to link the prepaid card to a specific ATM withdrawal made the same day, using security footage from the ATM's surveillance camera. The grainy image, enhanced by forensic specialists, showed a man matching Markham Sterling's description: average height, nondescript build, unkempt brown hair falling into his pale eyes. He was wearing a dark hoodie, his face obscured by shadow, but the distinctive set of his jaw, the weary slump of his shoulders were eerily familiar. This was the man Sarah had felt watching her. This was likely Control Art 77. The digital breadcrumbs and the physical clue of the yellow paint were converging. Hayes looked at the enhanced ATM photo, then back at the image of Sarah Jenkins, her bright hazel eyes full of life and artistic fervor. The contrast was devastating. Sterling's need for control, his twisted sense of entitlement, had led him to target Sarah, a symbol of everything he felt he lacked. The yellow paint wasn't just a pigment, it was a symbol of connection, a silent testament to a shared space, however violent, between victim and perpetrator. Hayes knew they were on the verge of a breakthrough. Sterling was no longer an unseen shadow, he was a tangible suspect, a man who had left a digital and physical trail, however faint. The hunt was intensifying, moving from the sterile confines of cyberspace into the real world, a world where the consequences of Sterling's actions were tragically, irrevocably real. Hayes felt a surge of grim determination. He would not rest until Markham Sterling was brought to justice, until Sarah Jenkins' story, however tragic, was fully told.
Resentments and a twisted sense of entitlement. He felt overlooked, invisible, and had developed a dangerous fascination with control. Sarah Jenkins, a bright, burgeoning artist with her auburn hair and expressive hazel eyes and a future brimming with promise, had represented everything he felt he lacked. The prosecution's case, painstakingly built by Hayes, rested on a mountain of circumstantial evidence. Sterling's car seen near where Sarah's was found, partial DNA traces, and his unsettling online presence that hinted at a disturbing obsession with Sarah's art and life. Hayes knew that proving intent, the motive behind the alleged act, would be the hardest battle. He glanced at the exhibits laid out on a table. Sarah's paint-splattered denim jacket, a crumpled sketch pad found near her abandoned vehicle, a single mud-caked canvas shoe. Each item was a ghost, a silent scream from the past, a piece of Sarah Jenkins that had been cruelly snatched away. He saw the flicker of fear in Sterling's eyes, quickly masked by a stony indifference, and it fueled his determination. This wasn't just about a conviction, it was about restoring a semblance of order, about offering Brenda Jenkins the only justice that remained possible. The prosecutor, a sharp, experienced woman named Evelyn Reed, cleared her throat, preparing to deliver her opening statement. Hayes felt the familiar knot of tension tighten in his stomach. The marathon had reached its final, crucial stage, and the weight of Sarah's lost potential, her unfinished masterpieces, pressed down on him, a silent, constant reminder of what was at stake. The prosecution's case was meticulously laid out, each piece of evidence presented with the somber gravity it deserved. Evelyn Reed, the prosecutor, guided the jury through the timeline of Sarah Jenkins' final days, painting a picture of a young artist brimming with life and promise. Hayes had provided her with a comprehensive file, a testament of months of relentless investigation, piecing together the fragmented narrative of Sarah's abduction and presumed murder. The details were stark, almost unbearable. Sarah, 22 years old, was last seen leaving her university art studio on the evening of September 18, 2023. Her car, a sensible silver sedan, was discovered abandoned 3 days later on a desolate county road, keys still in the ignition, her purse and phone missing. Hayes remembered the chilling quiet of that discovery, the way the late afternoon sun cast long, mournful shadows across the empty vehicle. He recalled his own painstaking search of the surrounding area, the desperate hope that she might have simply wandered off, perhaps disoriented. But the evidence, grimly, pointed elsewhere. The defense, led by a seasoned but visibly overwhelmed attorney, attempted to sow seeds of doubt, suggesting alternative theories, focusing on the lack of a direct eyewitness to the abduction itself. But the circumstantial evidence was mounting, a suffocating blanket of probability. The prosecution presented cell tower data that placed Sterling's unremarkable black pickup truck within a 2-mile radius of where Sarah's car was found during the critical time frame. Forensic analysis of microscopic fibers found in Sarah's car allegedly matched the material of a distinctive faded blue hoodie found in Sterling's apartment, a hoodie he'd consistently denied wearing that week. Then came the digital footprint. Sterling's social media, a ghost town for years, had recently shown a disturbing resurgence, not with personal updates, but with obsessive searches related to Sarah's online art portfolio. He'd liked dozens of her paintings, comments filled with unsettlingly possessive language that spoke of admiration bordering on fixation. Hayes's team had dug deep, unearthing an interview with a former colleague of Sterling's who recalled Mark expressing intense resentment towards individuals he perceived as having an easier or more privileged life, often citing artists or successful young professionals. Sterling, a man whose own life had been characterized by repeated failures and a pervasive sense of invisibility, had apparently fixated on Sarah. He'd curated her online presence, studied her routine, and, the prosecution argued, saw in her everything he was not. Brenda Jenkins, seated stoically in the front row, her face a mask of controlled agony, listened to every word. She remembered Sarah's youthful exuberance, her passionate accounts of the art world, her dreams of gallery shows and critical acclaim. This was her daughter, vibrant, talented, and so full of life. The contrast with the man now accused of ending that life was a chasm too wide to comprehend. Hayes watched her, a silent guardian of her grief. He knew this trial was as much for her as it was for the abstract concept of justice. He'd seen firsthand the devastating impact of unsolved crimes, the perpetual torment of not knowing, of having a hole ripped through the fabric of one's existence. He replayed the moment they'd found Sarah's car, the driver's side door ajar, a faint scent of her favorite lavender perfume lingering in the stale air, a half-finished sketch pad on the passenger seat, its pages filled with whimsical charcoal drawings of mythical creatures and vibrant cityscapes. It was a tableau of interrupted life, a chilling testament to the sudden, violent end. He imagined Sarah, her bright hazel eyes scanning the horizon, perhaps lost in thought about her next artistic endeavor, only to be blindsided by a presence she never saw coming. He thought of Sterling, his muted gray eyes, his nondescript appearance, a man who had perfected the art of blending into the background, of existing unseen, until he decided to make his presence violently known. The prosecution's voice droned on, detailing the forensic evidence, the timeline, the digital breadcrumbs, but for Hayes it all circled back to the bright, promising artist whose talent was silenced far too soon. He looked at the exhibit of Sarah's painting jacket, the faint smudges of paint on the sleeves, a silent accusation. The courtroom was a pressure cooker of anticipation. Every breath seemed amplified. every rustle of paper a thunderclap. The jury, a cross-section of Dallas citizens, had deliberated for what felt like an eternity. For Detective Michael Hayes, late 40s, his 6'0" frame rigid in his dark suit, it was the culmination of months of relentless pursuit, of piecing together a life stolen and a killer brought to account. He'd pored over every detail, every fiber, every digital footprint, driven by a profound sense of duty and the silent plea of Sarah Jenkins. His piercing blue eyes, usually scanning with analytical intensity, were now fixed on the jury foreman, searching for any flicker of emotion, any hint of their decision. Beside him, Brenda Jenkins, early 50s, her frail figure enveloped in a simple dark dress, sat with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were bone white. The soft brown hair, streaked with gray, seemed to absorb the muted courtroom light, mirroring the exhaustion etched onto her face, her eyes red-rimmed but steady, fixed on the daunting task of facing the outcome. She represented the human cost of this harrowing ordeal, a mother whose grief had been a constant companion since September 18, 2023, the day her daughter, Sarah, 22, vanished. The prosecution had presented a compelling case, weaving together the circumstantial threads into a narrative of calculated cruelty. Evelyn Reed, the prosecutor, had meticulously detailed how Markham Sterling, mid-30s, average height, nondescript build, unkempt brown hair, pale skin, muted gray eyes, had allegedly stalked and abducted Sarah. The evidence, though circumstantial, was overwhelming. Sterling's truck's proximity to Sarah's abandoned car, the fiber analysis, and Sterling's unsettling digital obsession with Sarah's vibrant, hopeful art. The defense had fought valiantly, attempting to create doubt, but the sheer weight of evidence, combined with Sterling's own nervous demeanor throughout the trial, had tipped the scales. Sterling, looking particularly pallid and unshaven in his dark, unremarkable clothing, sat at the defense table, his shoulders slumped. His medium-length brown hair fell across his forehead, partially obscuring his vacant, calculating eyes. He was a figure of grim anonymity, a stark contrast to the bright, artistic life he was accused of extinguishing. Hayes watched him, a flicker of grim satisfaction in his gut, knowing that justice, in its imperfect, arduous form, was about to be served. The foreman stood, the rustle of paper a prelude to destiny. He cleared his throat, his voice ringing out in the hushed chamber. On the charge of aggravated kidnapping, we find the defendant, Markham Sterling, guilty. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom, quickly stifled. Brenda Jenkins' hand flew to her mouth, tears finally spilling, not of sorrow, but of a profound, agonizing relief. She let out a choked sob, a sound that spoke volumes of the years of fear and uncertainty. Hayes placed a hand gently on her shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of her strength, her endurance. Sterling's head snapped up, his muted gray eyes widening in disbelief, then hardening into a mask of cold fury. He let out a low growl, a primal sound that momentarily silenced the room. He was a man who had craved control, and now it was irrevocably lost. The subsequent guilty verdict on the charge of murder solidified the outcome, sealing Sterling's fate. The judge, acknowledging the gravity of the crime and the devastating impact on the Jenkins family, handed down a sentence that Hayes felt was just. Sterling would spend the rest of his life behind bars, a stark consequence for extinguishing a life full of color and potential. As the courtroom began to empty, Brenda Jenkins walked slowly towards Hayes. She was still crying, but a faint, fragile smile touched her lips. "Thank you, Detective. You found her. You gave her justice." Hayes met her gaze, his own blue eyes softening. "We did our job, Mrs. Jenkins. Sarah's story will be remembered." He looked at the empty seat where Sarah's vibrant spirit had once been, the place marked by her paint-splattered jacket as evidence.
Her dreams of gallery shows, of making her mark on the art world, would remain unfinished, but her memory and the pursuit of justice for her had concluded. The sun was setting outside Dallas, casting long shadows across the sky, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a final, poignant masterpiece for the lost artist.